you straight. You did it like I'm 15, 16 years old. And she laying on the couch. And I'm sitting on the other end, and she laid down on the couch and put her head in my lap. I'm like, damn. He can't be talking about Mary was talking about she wanted me to come back up here, now she on my lap. And I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, I'm like, okay, what is this gonna end up to? And she stayed a couple more hours. And we decided to go in the other room because it was a suite. We went in another room and laid down. And she laid down with me and she kind of like backed up against me. And every time she backed up against me, I would move away and shit, you know?
You know what I'm saying? I was a spiritual, whether people know it or not, because God don't kill people. You know what I'm saying? Whether people know it or not. And I could go deep, but a lot of people I would have to really bring who, you know what I'm saying? For what I learned. And she just was cut down in the prime of her life. And it's so unfair. And it wasn't time. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't, I believe it wasn't her time to go because from what I know, it ain't supposed to go down like that. And just simple obedience, like, you know, your gut always won you. That your gut never lies to you. And something like luggage and clothes and jewelry and all this madness that we worship is called false idols. We need to really look at the bigger picture right now.
We was talking, I think I left out and Suge called me back up to the room. He said, come back upstairs, man, or old girl want to see you. This old girl. I'm thinking one of the other girls. Mary sitting on the couch. So I know the girl that he in the bed with don't want me. So I went in, he closed the door and shit, and I sit down and I start talking to Mary. And the inside, I'm about to lose it, because I'm actually sitting here talking to Mary. She's sitting on the couch and shit, and we ordered some food and some more drinks.
Early on, you was messing with Mary. Well, okay,
how
did you think about that?
That time I wasn't.
I
kind of was, but wasn't.
That's what I'm saying. How did you think? Like, what did you feel like? Okay, yeah, I like Mary, or you just was like, was she taking advantage of you because you were young?
No, I mean, that was Mary J. Blige.
She was young too.
She was young too, and that was Mary J. Blige. And when I brought that story up, because a lot of people thought that I was like trying to Me Too. I mean, I wouldn't have used her. I got somebody I could Me Too if I want to, but it wouldn't be Mary.
It wouldn't be Mary.
I said it in the conversation of, somebody else was saying how Mary was somebody's girl, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, no, it wasn't. That was my girl. That time I had an opportunity to go out to New York and visit her a couple more times. But that's why I was kind of confused when I heard Kurt saying that Mary was Pot girl, because at that time she was my girl. At that time, I'm 15, 16 years old, and she flying me in to see her. And you know what it is when a girl back up on you, you young, and I'm trying to show her that she ain't phasing me.
Mary J. Blige accused of seducing a 15-year-old while allegedly pregnant with Diddy's baby? That's the explosive claim coming from Danny Boy, the former Death Row singer who's blowing the lid off what he calls one of the music industry's darkest secrets. With federal heat already bearing down on Diddy, Danny is now dropping bombshells that pull Mary J. Blige into the scandal, not just as a bystander, but as an alleged co-conspirator in grooming, manipulation, and secret affairs with underage boys. And if you thought this story couldn't get more twisted, Danny's shocking allegations include threesomes, secret pregnancies, coerced abortions, and a tangled web that may link Mary, Diddy, Tupac, and more. Buckle up, because this isn't just celebrity drama. This could be criminal. Let's get right into it, because what Danny Boy just exposed might be the most disturbing twist yet in the Diddy saga. He's not just naming names. He's accusing Mary J. Blige, yes, the queen of hip-hop soul, of seducing him when he was just 15 years old. According to Danny, it wasn't some reckless teenage fling. He claims Diddy knew about it. Worse, he says Diddy arranged it. And it gets darker. Danny says there was a pregnancy, a real one, but it never saw the light of day because, according to him, there was pressure to take care of it. That's his language. Code for a forced abortion if you read between the lines. And if you think that's wild, just wait, because he's hinting this was far from an isolated incident. This isn't just a scandal. It's a bombshell with decades of silence behind it. and it could blow open everything. So who exactly is Danny Boy? And why is his voice suddenly cutting through all the noise? If you were around in the 90s, you might remember him as the smooth-voiced teen singer signed to Death Row Records during its most dangerous and influential era. At just 15 years old, Danny Boy was rubbing shoulders with Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Suge Knight, the entire West Coast royalty. He even sang the hook on Tupac's I Ain't Mad at Ya. But while the spotlight hit hard and fast, Danny's personal story was buried beneath the chaos of the industry. Now, decades later, Danny says it's time to speak. And he's not just reacting to Diddy's headlines. He's connecting the dots. With Diddy facing a federal sex trafficking investigation, multiple lawsuits, and mounting accusations of grooming and manipulation, Danny says the culture people are finally calling out now. It's the same one he lived through as a child. He claims what's being exposed today is just the surface, and underneath is a system that chewed him up and spit him out. And this is where Mary J. Blige enters the story. Because back in 1995, Danny wasn't just a kid with a record deal. He was being shuffled between studios, industry parties, and private hotel rooms by people like Diddy. People who knew Mary. People who, according to Danny, planned for things to happen that number 15-year-old should have been involved in. He says he's not out for revenge. He's out for the truth. And the receipts he's holding? They're shaking the foundation of hip-hop's golden era. It was the summer of 1995, right after the infamous Source Awards, the night that practically split hip-hop down the middle. East Coast versus West Coast tension was thick in the air, but inside one elite afterparty, the vibe was different. Glowing. Velvet ropes, champagne flowing, and A-list stars in every corner. Mary J. Blige was there, draped in diamonds and attitude, the queen of hip-hop soul. Misa Hilton, the stylist behind the era's most iconic looks, floated in and out of VIP with a young Diddy at her side, still puffing his chest from Bad Boy's Big Night. And somewhere in the mix was Danny Boy, 15 years old, a fresh Death Row signee, wide-eyed and soaking it all in. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. But someone, he says it might have been Diddy himself, pulled him into that inner circle like a kid brother being let in on the grown folk secrets. He remembers the low lights, the heat of the room, the bass from the speakers vibrating through his chest. He was starstruck, floating. Then came the invitation. Mary wants to see you. Just that. No explanation. No warning. Just a handler whispering in his ear and leading him down the hallway of the luxury hotel, right past the crowd, to a door that was already cracked open. He stepped inside, thinking maybe it was a mentorship moment. Maybe she liked his voice. Maybe she wanted to talk music. But what he walked into was something else entirely. Danny says she was waiting alone. The room smelled like perfume and champagne. There was soft music playing, something slow and sultry. And before he could fully process what was happening, he says Mary got close. Too close. He remembers freezing, heart pounding, trying to play it cool while his instinct screamed that this wasn't right. And then it happened. He was just 15, still a kid. But in that moment, he says he was pulled into something painfully adult, something he never consented to, something he says left him confused, ashamed, and silent for decades. That night was supposed to be a celebration. But for Danny, it became the beginning of a secret he'd carry with him all his life. After that night, everything changed. Danny Boy says Mary J. Blige didn't just disappear. She pulled him in deeper. In the months that followed, she allegedly flew him out to New York multiple times. Private jets, hotel suites, romantic dinners. For a 15-year-old boy raised in chaos and craving validation, it felt like a dream. She wasn't just a superstar. She was a superstar. Danny says he truly believed they were in a relationship. Not a hookup, not a fling, but something real. She'd call him, text him, tell him he was special, that he had it, that he needed to stay close to her and not let industry drama pull them apart. And for a kid coming from the wild world of Death Row Records, Mary felt like a safe space. But the reality, according to Danny, was far murkier. Because while he was falling for her, believing he had something sacred, Mary J. Blige was allegedly still entangled with others. There were rumors she was seeing Tupac on the side during that same period. And then there was KCI from Jodeci, who she'd been publicly on and off with for years. Danny says he started noticing patterns, calls that stopped abruptly, cryptic messages, cold silences followed by sudden warmth. He was being love-bombed, then iced out, then pulled back in. And remember, this wasn't a grown man getting played. This was a teenage boy, isolated, vulnerable, flown out and dropped back into his label's chaos without ever understanding what had really happened between them. Was he a secret? Was he being used? Danny now describes it as emotional manipulation masked as mentorship. The lines between affection, control, and exploitation were so blurred, he didn't even realize how deep the damage went until years later. He thought he was in love, but looking back, he says he was groomed, and the emotional wreckage of that confusion still haunts him. Because when the fantasy shattered, it wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about the loss of innocence, the betrayal of trust, and the silence he was forced to keep. Here's where things get darker, and a whole lot more calculated. Because according to Danny Boy, Mary J., Blige wasn't acting alone. He says the entire situation had a puppet master. And that puppet master was Sean Diddy Combs. Danny alleges it was Diddy who first encouraged, pressured him to be a man and get with Mary. That it wasn't just some random fling, it was arranged. A kind of rite of passage. And when Danny hesitated, confused and unsure, he says Diddy gave him a chilling ultimatum. Do it, or lose everything. Think about that. A 15-year-old boy, caught between superstardom and the street, being told that his shot at success depended on going through with something he didn't fully understand, something he wasn't ready for. Danny claims Diddy made it clear, comply, or you're out. Out of the label, out of the industry, out of the dream. And when you look at it in the broader context of what we now know about Diddy's alleged freak-off parties, the pattern becomes eerily familiar. Cassie's lawsuit painted a picture of a man who used sex as power, who controlled women's bodies, manipulated situations, and blurred every boundary between pleasure, performance, and coercion. Other victims have said similar things. That Diddy groomed them, broke them, and then acted like he was their savior. So is Danny's story just another puzzle piece? A young male victim, forced into silence while Diddy played kingmaker behind the scenes? Because if this is true, it means Diddy wasn't just exploiting women. He was pulling strings on all sides, male and female, constructing a twisted empire built on fear, manipulation, and sexual control. And in that light, Danny wasn't a prodigy. He was a pawn, a teenage boy sacrificed on the altar of fame, with Diddy standing in the shadows, holding the match. Let's be clear, what happened to Danny Boy wasn't some isolated scandal. It wasn't just about Mary, or Diddy, or a single, shady night in Los Angeles. This was part of a much bigger machine. A culture of exploitation embedded deep within the music industry, and Uptown Records was one of its earliest breeding grounds. In the early 90s, Uptown was the epicenter of what people now call the golden era of hip-hop and R&B. Andre Harrell's label gave rise to acts like Jodeci, Heavy D, I'll Be Sure, and of course, Mary J. Blige. Behind the glitz, the flashy jackets, and the record deals was a system quietly grooming artists, especially young, poor black talent, to become emotionally dependent, hypersexualized, and ultimately controlled. Danny Boy isn't the only one who's come forward with this kind of story. Behind closed doors, multiple former Uptown artists have whispered about being plucked from obscurity, then molded and manipulated, given just enough success to stay loyal, but never enough freedom to walk away. It was a machine that thrived on trauma. Labels didn't just market the pain, they caused it. They scouted vulnerability like a commodity. And Mary? She was a product of that system. Before she ever got close to Danny, she was already deep in the game, battling her own demons, surrounded by men like Diddy who blurred every moral line. Sources have claimed that Diddy didn't just manage Mary. He mentored her in more ways than one. That her raw edge, her realness, was cultivated by Diddy to sell records, yes, but also to push boundaries, to lure others in, to replicate the power dynamics she had survived. So when Danny says he was groomed by Mary, it's not about painting her as the sole villain. It's about understanding how abuse becomes cyclical. How people who are hurt, especially in these elite circles, are often taught to pass that pain forward. And the industry rewards it, packages it as authenticity, markets it as grit. This is why the story matters. Not because it's salacious, not because it's messy, but because it exposes the rot at the core of the music business, an entire ecosystem that thrives on the bodies and minds of Black youth. Uptown Records may have been the training ground, but that same poison spread through Bad Boy, through Death Row, through every major label that saw dollar signs instead of human lives. Danny Boy's trauma is one chapter in a much darker story, a story of how the industry eats its young, covers it up, and calls it the cost of fame. But the truth? That cost has always been paid in silence. And now, finally, people are talking. Now that Danny Boy has broken his silence, the question is, what happens next? Because this isn't just a wild accusation floating in the rumor mill. This is a serious, potentially explosive claim that could ripple far beyond the blogosphere and straight into the courtroom. With Sean Diddy, Combs already facing a tsunami of federal investigations and lawsuits, including Cassie's explosive sex trafficking allegations, Danny's story could very well become evidence. Let's start with the obvious. Will Danny Boy be called to testify? Legal experts are already whispering that he might. His allegations open the door to a broader pattern of abuse and grooming, especially involving minors. If federal prosecutors are building a case around Diddy's long-standing pattern of coercive control, Danny's story fits disturbingly well. His account ties into several key pillars of the existing investigation: manipulation, sex as a tool of power, and Diddy's use of artists to lure and control others. If Danny's claims check out, and if there's corroborating evidence, even circumstantial, he could be subpoenaed, not just to tell his story, but to help connect the dots. But then comes the next question: what about Mary J. Blige? Could she be next in line for legal scrutiny? That's where things get murky and controversial. Mary isn't currently under investigation, at least not publicly. But if Danny Boy's claims are true, she was 24 and he was 15. That's a clear violation in the eyes of the law, no matter how the industry tries to spin it. And while the statute of limitations may protect her from prosecution depending on the jurisdiction and timeline, the court of public opinion doesn't have a time limit, especially not in the post-Me Too era. If Danny takes the stand, or even just gives a sworn statement, Mary could suddenly find herself facing intense media pressure, industry backlash, and public demands for accountability. Her past could be put under the microscope, and that carefully guarded image of the queen of hip-hop's soul might start to crack. Which brings us to something even deeper: the blurred line between victim and accomplice. Because Mary herself has spoken again and again about her traumatic childhood, the sexual abuse she endured, the battles with addiction, the violent men she escaped. Her pain was never secret. In fact, it was marketed. It was profitable. Her music was built on heartbreak and survival. So how do we process a version of events where she, a victim in so many stories, becomes the predator in someone else's? And then there's Diddy, already cornered by multiple lawsuits, a federal probe, whistleblowers, and damning testimony. Danny's revelations, if they stick, could destroy any lingering doubt that this was just about sex or just about Cassie. This becomes a story about an empire built on exploitation, about a man who didn't just abuse people himself, but allegedly trained others to do it for him. It paints a picture of a decades-long culture of grooming, control, and trauma, disguised as mentorship, hidden behind platinum plaques and champagne flutes. And now, that empire is crumbling. But here's the part that's keeping people up at night. If Danny Boy's story is real, how many others are out there? How many teenage boys and girls were caught in the machine and told to be a man, or be sexy, or shut up and perform? How many were used, discarded, and silenced while the industry cashed in? And how many are finally ready to speak? Because this story isn't over. Not even close. If Danny is called to testify, everything changes. Not just for Diddy, not just for Mary, but for the entire legacy of 90s R&B and hip-hop. That golden era so many fans idolize could be re-examined under a harsh new light, one that shows the pain behind the platinum. So now, the world is watching. Prosecutors are watching. Mary's team is watching. Diddy's lawyers are scrambling. And as more survivors speak up, one thing is clear. The music industry's darkest secrets are finally being dragged into the light. We'll be following every development. So stay tuned, because the next name to drop could change everything.